Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we cover hot topics that are on the top of people's minds. Today, Roma van der Walt is here. She is CEO of Vittel, a health intelligence company. Her work sits at the intersection of exercise physiology, women's health data, and systems design. This sports scientist wants to decode how female bodies adapt. Roma is here for the case file I call Closing the Gap. Roma, you talk about female adaptation. What does that really mean when it comes to health?
Adaptation is really the body's reaction to stimulus. So we look at stimulus as exercise, for example, and then looking at how the body reacts to that. And the ideal adaptation is that we get stronger, we get faster, we get healthier. And when I talk about female adaptation, it's really about the fact that for men, those adaptations can be a bit more binary. Good stimulus, good adaptation. But as we know, for women, our physiology is not as straightforward. So we have layers that come in through our hormones. We have the mental load of having really rich lives. And every month looks different for us. Every week looks different for us. So that adaptation window that we've established in the past was probably based 90% on men. And we look at, 48 hours to 72 hours of getting a good adaptive response. But in a female body, there are all these external factors that factor into that. And that means that we have to look at adaptation differently depending on what day of the month it is.
Right. And this matters because service providers, not just doctors, but even the products and the services, there are so many health apps, lots of different kinds of tests, and even fitness machines that are really built more around the data from men. And women are not just little men, they're actually women and have different physiological and biological as well as just spatial needs.
That's right. If you look at data very consistently over the past century, we look at pharma, we look at technology now. More recently, we look at research, like clinical research, and women were only really brought into the picture very late. So if we look at medical research, women were not included in clinical studies until 1993, which means we're only working with data that is female specific since then. It has an effect on how we dose over-the-counter medications, how we dose pharmacological medications. There are studies that looked at the adverse and potentially deadly effects of drugs that were recalled, and most of them, up until not too long ago, 8 out of 10 were recalled because of the adverse and deadly effects on female bodies.
Wow.
And in another study they looked at 86 different drugs, and 96% of them had a very different adverse effect on females.
All right, so this is definitely a crisis. That's why you're on the Crisis Files right now. How do we even start to combat this and to fix these issues?
Right now, I'm really optimistic that the topic is gaining a lot of momentum. Between social media and now also AI, the people are empowered to seek for information themselves. It's a double-edged sword. It's a very fast way to disseminate information and for people to question their relationship with a practitioner, with a physician. That's not always a good thing because these people went to school and practiced for a very long time. But it means that we can look at any response that we get and figure out whether it was given to us as a one-size-fits-all. So as an example, I've started questioning wearables. We have 2 tracks that feed in. So we have female physiology, we have male physiology. And then by all accounts, we have 1 track that feeds out. So you take any of the popular wearables and they have not algorithmically been configured for us. You look at large language models, so the ChatGPTs, Geminis,
right,
the
which
Claudes.
A lot of people just say AI. So we look at AI.
AI.
And AI is trying to speed up everything.
Yes, AI is using the information that was humanly generated. If we have 90% of humanly generated data that was based off of male physiology, then now these very powerful systems are reinforcing the fact that we're not taking women into consideration. So now, as we get more empowered, we're also asking these systems to help us. But the systems themselves were first trained on 90% male data, and now they're actually being trained on themselves, which means that what initially went in is being reinforced and compounded with questions that were answered incorrectly because women were asking about female physiology and were getting responses back that were benchmarked off of predominantly male physiology.
And you've taught me that the AI actually hallucinates when it receives female data. What does that mean?
It means that you can ask a question and it could be about objective quantitative data. So let's look at training output. Let's look at your sleep values. I don't know if you want to go into the details of things like resting heart rate, but it's a very good marker for women to observe. If you ask a question around those metrics, the further you get down in your questions and prompts, at some point, the AI might switch out the benchmarks because it goes, I forgot what you asked in the beginning. Is this a woman who's in her 40s, who's reasonably fit? And it's happened to me where suddenly it switched out the benchmarks and then gave me training focus and then also recommendations on where I could get to over the next 6 months that would make me an Olympian right now.
Wow. Right. Now, you are a former professional athlete, and so this is something you know a lot about. How has the technology even evolved since you were competing to now? And give us kind of a visual on why this matters so much.
The technology has come such a long way. There are a lot of ways that I had to check my biometrics manually. So, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in order to get your resting heart rate, an athlete would wake up and put 2 fingers against their neck and set a timer or look at their watch or a clock and count how many beats per minute they had in 60 seconds. It's inherently difficult to do because you wake up and you're supposed to be at rest. It's your resting heart rate. But you wake up and you go, oh, I need to do my resting heart rate. And there's this moment of adrenaline and just alertness that might throw that off. So being able to wear a band or a ring or a watch and just wake up and know that they did their job while you were just waking up is wonderful. It's really great. And it's longitudinal because you do it every night and you don't forget. And you get a very reliable metric. So I'm a big fan of that. That can obviously swing into the opposite, which then makes people obsessed with those metrics. They can tell you that you should be feeling great, but you wake up and emotionally you feel not so good. So then what do you let override that initial feeling? Do you go by what the ring told you or the band told you? Do you go by what you feel? If you take it too far, you might just say, oh, my wearable told me I'm not feeling good today. So as a result of that, I will not train. I will not go outside. It could impact you in meetings. It could impact you in any interactions with people. So looking at multifaceted data and proxy data that then adequately could represent that state is really important.
So now, the regular consumer isn't going to be getting this deep dive that you do. So how can the regular consumer take this information you're sharing and make it work in their lives? Because the preventive care market is $800 billion right now, but interventions for women are, as you've described them to me, reactive, siloed, very one-size-fits-all, as you've talked about here even. So how do we, just the regular consumer, not the pro athlete, not the former competitive athlete even, make this count for us?
Mm-hmm. We have sort of, it depends a bit on budget. We have a lot of options now. The longevity movement is alive and well. The perimenopause, menopause movement for women is alive and well. I would say start with what you inherently know about your body. There's some truth underneath, there's some intuition that can tell you when you're feeling good and when you're feeling off. That's not something that should be overridden by an app telling you that you are in a specific menstrual phase, because that phase might look just fine for you. That shouldn't be overridden by one day's metric. That should be discussed with a proactive and preventive healthcare professional or practitioner. And I like to add things that are good for me rather than being told that I have to take things away that are really terrible for me. They are obviously non-negotiables, and you had some fantastic guests recently on the podcast that talked about them. But there's a lot that we can observe over a longer period of time with the help of these devices now to look at a rhythm. For women, I think it's all about a rhythm. The cycle works as a word, but it's really a rhythm for ourselves. There would be one metric that we recognize that often results in days where we're subpar. There might be other metric where that just doesn't matter, not on the day. If it's several days in a line, in a row, then yes. So for example, elevated resting heart rate for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, you're either getting sick or there's some more serious inflammation and just your resilience is down. It's observation. It's a lot of observation. And I think that's something that athletes learn from a very young age. And it's something that we have to relearn as we get older.
So whether you're an athlete or a regular person, and even if you're just casually a biker or a runner, you're considered a non-professional athlete. I mean, you're doing something regularly. Knowing our own numbers, listening to our gut also when something doesn't seem right. It also seems that we need to have the correct medical provider who will actually believe us.
Yes, and that goes back to that big market that you just mentioned, 800 billion. There was a report that came out that said that the female health gap corrected could lead to $1 trillion in global GDP increase.
Wow.
So this is just taking better care of women. And we say,
meaning
wow,
they would just be more productive and contributing to their societies.
They would be more productive. And as a result, societies are healthier too, and more productive and better. Now, put that against AI, and I would actually argue the number is much larger. So one AI company recently raised $122 billion in one funding round to be valued at over $800 billion. One company. Now, that same company is operating on 90% male data. Imagine if that gets corrected, and we see that there's so many of those companies now, and the follow-on effect of better information for more people at a lower cost around the world. I would actually argue that 1 trillion is vastly underreported.
So this is not just a doctor-patient issue. This is in the absolute productivity of nations of the globe, and fewer sick days, fewer illness, maybe chronic pain, less chronic pain and other diseases. And it just boils down to taking that data seriously and not treating it as one size fits all, and a one size fits all that's more male dominated.
Exactly. Because women show up, women will always seek information. So that information is powerful. But that information is not just for the women. That information is for up and coming young physicians. This information is for physicians who have been established. It's about shortening the timeline of research that's finally being conducted on female-specific conditions to actually being implemented. There's a huge gap between the two. So knowing that AI can support that, but it has to have the right foundation.
Fascinating information. We will stay in touch with you. We'll watch your work. Thank you for doing the work, because the regular folks out there, we're not doing it. Thank you, because ultimately better outcomes are ahead. And I know at this phase of just educating people and the advocacy, that is an uphill battle. So here at the Crisis Files, we wish you so much luck. You can connect directly with Roma at Vittel.co. This case file is powered by Petal & Stem. Known as an aging architect, Dr. Deepa Pai focuses on elevating the standard of care in the medical aesthetics industry. Clients from all over the United States visit Dr. Pai for her customized offerings. Petal & Stem is one of the only med spas in the U.S. to use a hospital-grade ultrasound machine. For a customized skin treatment journey and to see why Dr. Pai and team have clients getting on a plane for their expertise, go to petalstemmmedspa.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. Visit thecrisisfiles.com for all 4 seasons of the show. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.